Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Pete Carroll Was Right, the confusingly named Alabama football live show. As always, it's Carter, Ben, and Mitch here to talk all things Alabama football with you. Well, we're back after a short hiatus. Sorry about that, guys, but we're back and raring to go. Coming off two pair of generally undramatic victories over Arkansas and Missouri, if they were both a little weird in their own ways. And looking forward to the third Saturday in October. It is Tennessee Hate Week, folks. Although I don't know that we'll have a whole lot to say about Tennessee this week. They're not that great. No. Good on them for beating Auburn. I mean, I'm very happy to see that. I always like to watch Auburn lose, and so that's always fun.
And good for Jeremy. Jeremy had a nice quote after the game I saw about how it's always great to beat Auburn, especially in Auburn. And I saw someone point out that Pruitt has played against Auburn like every year since he's been in college football, maybe, which is kind of interesting, right? Because for a lot of that time he wasn't even in the West. And for one of those years he wasn't even in the SEC. Yeah. Right. So it's kind of funny how that worked out, right?
As a guy who grew up a Bama fan and has coached against them that much, I imagine Jeremy Pruitt probably hates Auburn more than Saban does.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he has a little bit of a more personal stake probably than a lot of the people. But we should probably look back a little bit first before we look forward. So Alabama is 7-0, right? 7-0.
Yep.
Okay, they are 7-0. I guess the biggest thing to talk about is Tua, right? It's kind of what is on everybody's mind, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of people talking about and there was a poll up on RBR today that was how much should Tua play at Tennessee? And I just if he's ready to go and he's cleared to go, then he should play. Maybe you have a little shorter leash for him than maybe you pull him when they're up 3 scores instead of 4. But they're not gonna, if Tua is healthy enough to play and there's not any increased danger. This doesn't seem to be a serious enough thing that you risk further ligament damage just by playing him with any bigger risk than there already is just from playing football. So
and here's the thing too, so I don't mean to be too critical of RBR, but we're an equal opportunity podcast here in our criticisms. So, I don't really think that we should be, I don't know. It's kind of bad practice to basically to ask folks to try to foster and solicit opinions from people about something that they can't answer. We just can't. Right? I mean, I've talked about this on Twitter, and I truly believe that this is just an unanswerable question from people in our position. I mean, we sit here and we talk about things, and we don't have all the information, right? So my big thing is don't give opinions on something where you don't have all the information. Well, we sit here and give opinions all the time about topics that we don't have all the information, but we have none of the information here. We know absolutely nothing about the specifics.
All we know is that it was hurt, and Saban said he tweaked it again against Missouri.
Right.
And then they both said on Monday, Saban during a press conference and Tua on Monday Night Football, that it was better this week than it was last week, even coming out of the Arkansas game. So, we can, yeah.
Well, I was just gonna say, even if that's all true, let's accept that that's all true. That gives us nothing.
Yeah.
And we also don't even know if that's true. There's reason to question whether or not any of that's true. So ultimately you come out of this just not really knowing anything. And because of that, I just don't have an opinion, I guess, right? I mean,
what was the actual, I haven't actually seen the question. What was the actual question they posed? Was it should play or
it's how much should Tua play?
As much as I Like,
and I don't mean to like particularly pick on our like this is
well, it's everybody. No, it's everybody.
Yeah, this question, this post is like indicative of like the mood and discussion among the fan base right now. So I only bring that up as an example. I just think it's like, you know, you have to preface everything you say. Obviously, it's just like if he's ready to play, then it's not a discussion. He plays, and you take him out when you would normally take him out, which is usually been pretty early this year, and it's not like
probably will be against Tennessee.
Yeah.
If he's more hurt but he can play, then maybe you take him. Like you said, maybe you only let him play till they get up 3 scores or something. Or if there's actually reason to think that he could get injured more from playing, or if there's reason to think that not playing would do him a lot of good going forward into the LSU game, then you could maybe argue that he shouldn't play. But in order to argue any of those possible positions, and there's more possible positions that you could argue that I didn't even mention, but in order to stump for any of those positions, you need to know things that you don't know, that I don't know, that none of us know. So like, I don't know, like it's at the point where you just have to like trust that they're going to just do the right thing, right?
Yeah, it's like you're arguing different like conclusions based on everyone's just sort of picking an initial state and guessing that that's the correct one, and that's not really a great way to have a productive discussion.
So I think what's more interesting maybe is to talk about his performance against Missouri.
Yeah.
What did you guys think of his performance against Missouri?
A little like you could. I mean, it's like you could tell the knee was bothering him, right? It didn't seem like he was he couldn't move quite as well. He couldn't seem to sort of drive the ball as well as he normally does. I mean, you could like he had 10 incompletions, which is like about as many as he's had combined the rest of the season. So, but still, I mean, it almost makes it scarier, right? It's like a visibly hobbled Tua threw for 265 yards and 3 touchdowns in the first half.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Pretty good. And unlike so a couple things for that. A lot of those yards did not come run after catch. The vast majority of those yards came through the air. Second of all,
it's not like this was like a whole bunch of screens that all got broken. Like this was still like their downfield passing offense. The only difference was he just didn't complete as many of those passes as he usually does.
And he had during the first half, he had 2 touchdowns that would have totaled about 100 yards, both called back due to penalties. And there was a non-call on Jerry Jeudy in the end zone on what I think was, in my opinion, a pretty perfectly thrown ball that would have been a touchdown had Jeudy not been grabbed, and then there was no call. So like he was even better than he was like really good. My actual impression of it. Well, Mitch, what about you? Where did you come down on Tua?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with all that. He looked a little ginger in the pocket. There was the fumble, obviously, that it seemed like he was just trying to keep his eyes down. Like somebody was coming open across the middle.
Yep, exactly. It was somebody was coming over on a deep, I think it was Ruggs on a deep square. And I think just before he got hit, he had decided that he was going to pull the trigger on that. Yeah. And like, he could have seen it a beat earlier. And if he had seen it a beat earlier, he could have gotten the ball out. So that's kind of on him for not seeing it in time. But I totally agree. Like that's where he was going with the football.
Yeah. And like, I don't want to, like, I'm fine with that. I don't want him to, I want him to keep, trust his instincts on that stuff. He's been pretty good at it. So
yeah. Like if that's that's literally the first turnover that's happened all season. So yeah.
And not only the first turnover, but one of the maybe, I don't know, 3 or 4 turnover worthy plays.
Right.
I actually thought he threw the ball really well. Like maybe like not quite as well as some of the other games, but I thought he threw the ball really well. I mean, he made some throws that were just phenomenal. Obviously, the first touchdown was just a ridiculous play. First touchdown was a ridiculous play because like which
one was that?
That was the one where it was a smoke. It was the deep shot to Jeudy. It was supposed to be a smoke and go to the left side. They covered the smoke and go. So like the play wasn't even designed to hit Judy over the top. And for Tua to come to the other side of the field and hit it, like it's one thing, like anytime you hit a deep post, it's impressive because it's such a long throw. But for you to hit a deep post on a play in which the primary was designed on the other side of the field is like super impressive to me. So that was like really impressive. He had a third down throw to Judy on like a 10-yard out pattern, which was in the first quarter, which was a great throw. I thought he actually threw the ball pretty well. I thought he made some bad decisions. I thought that this was the first game where he made just some bad decisions in coverage. There was a play, there was a second on the first field goal. There was a second down play where he kind of threw the ball in no man's land on the left side to Devontae Smith when he really had Judy coming free across the middle, who I think was supposed to be his primary that he came off of too quickly. And there was a couple others like that. So I just think he just really wasn't on top of his game in terms of like his processing speed, maybe, which might have also been like a factor from the injury, you know, a little tentative and everything. So
all that stuff can chain together. So it's always hard to tell like what's mental and what's physical because it all stacks together. And
yeah.
It's crazy that we can talk about that. It's like, he wasn't, here were all the things he did wrong that he doesn't usually do wrong. And,
yeah.
He was,
I thought Missouri covered I thought Missouri successfully covered a greater percentage of Alabama's passing plays than most teams that Alabama's faced this year. Maybe with the only exception being A&M. Like I thought there was maybe like a half dozen plays where Missouri honestly just took it away from Alabama, which is really to their credit. Like they just schemed well, they just covered well, and there was just not a lot there. So like that's really to their credit. The one thing that I did want to talk about, and this is something that we could talk about every week, but it was just so striking to me rewatching this game against Missouri. I've just never seen a quarterback this good on RPOs than him. I mean, and I know RPOs haven't been a thing for that long. So we're only talking about like half a dozen years, like, 5, 6, 7 years or something. But like, he's easily the best. I mean, he is amazing. He is right every time. He delivers the ball on time. He makes the decisions quickly. Like his processing speed is amazing. I mean, right?
He was built for this offense. Yeah, and it's making me look extremely good for talking about in the preseason how the elements that maybe Josh Gaddis would bring to this offense from Joe Moorhead and being like, oh, Tua is great for this offense because he's like Trace McSorley, but better in every way. I'd say that's pretty much right.
Yeah. I mean, and the what they're doing, I thought Saban made a comment about how like the offense is pretty much the same this year, except they've like added more RPOs, right?
Yeah,
I think basically. He made that comment like last week, and like
it's different RPOs. They're using downfield RPOs.
That's the way I've described it, as more not just adding, but like diversifying, right? Like I think that's what we've talked about in the past. Mitch, what do you think on that specifically on like the RPO game and everything?
Yeah, it's like so natural to him. I think it's. I guess we're getting to the generation now of quarterbacks where they may not know anything but RPOs to a degree, right?
Yeah.
Oh, so that's it. So that's interesting. So you think like maybe like this, partially this is a manifestation of like players are just more prepared for RPOs now than they used to be because there's more of an emphasis on it at the lower levels, and coaches are better at teaching it. That's really interesting. So Tua is like.
But Tua is still just so much better than everyone else at it.
I mean, it's like in the NBA. It's like in the NBA. It's like, okay, everybody takes a whole bunch of 3-pointers these days, and everybody's chucking it from deep and everything. But like, there's still only one Steph Curry, right?
Yeah,
right. I think that's a really interesting observation, though. That maybe this is partially a function of the fact that the overall bar for what it means for a quarterback to be good at RPOs is just being raised because it's more prevalent scheme and because quarterbacks are getting better. I think that's a great point, honestly. And then Tua is just the perfect guy for that, like
right.
for those, like to sort of rise up with those enhancements. So yeah, it was just really pretty jarring to watch, and I don't know, it's like unstoppable. How do you defend that if you're the linebackers? Like they're so good at scheming in these conflicts for the inside linebackers that I don't know what you do.
I mean, it's kind of crazy 7 weeks in and still being jarred by how good he is. It's
oh yeah.
That's
funny. What's the Heisman race like at this point?
It's Tua, Dwayne Haskins, a clear but fairly distant second. And if Tua had been actually playing fourth quarters, it wouldn't even be that close.
Right. Yeah, Tua's numbers would be unbelievable.
I mean, there are tons of like Heisman straw polls out there that have like, I think the Athletics one has Tua getting all 34 of their first place votes.
I guess is there. Let me ask you guys this. Let's say the season ended right now. Could a vote for anyone else even be justified?
No.
I bring that up in apropos of that straw poll that you're talking about. No, right?
No. Like you would get some sort of regionalist type thing where some guys were voting for, I don't know, Justin Herbert or some shit.
Sure.
But
what could be objectively justified?
No one.
But Haskins is second.
Yeah, I would say so. And even if you were going to be a contrarian who like insists that who like has to vote for a defensive player just on principle, like I don't know that there is a defensive player this year.
Quinn Williams, baby.
Besides Quinn Williams.
But yeah, you're right. Like there's no transcendent, or at least there's no player that has that, like defensive player that has that sort of like transcendent narrative.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree. So like the biggest threat is the injury, right?
Yep.
Both in terms of like, limiting his playing time and possibly like limiting his effectiveness. It's cool. It doesn't really matter. I just we probably should move on past Tua, but I just thought it was just sort of an interesting thing to like look at quickly. What else on the offense?
I think if this weren't already clear, I think Jerry is kind of separating himself in terms of, coming into the season, we talked a little bit about, we were like, oh yeah, it seems like Judy is kind of the most talented guy, but like the receivers are all kind of bundled together. But like Jerry is like, he's kind of separated himself now. And like, obviously the others are still great. And it's a deeper unit that Alabama's ever had. But if you were thinking coming into the season that this wasn't going to be like, the past where Alabama's had these dominant receivers and then they basically had nobody. Well, they do have a kind of dominant receiver. He's not getting, 60% of the catches the way a Julio or a Coop or a Calvin would, but it's clear that he's the guy and that he is in that same mold of a really, really impressive player in the way that Julio is Julio, but a type of player physically that like Calvin and Amari were.
So that's what I was going to ask. Like ignoring the production, because the production is a product of things that are outside of these guys' controls. Is he in that class with those guys? Is he the quote unquote next great Alabama receiver? Like if you look at like Julio, Amari, Calvin, like is Judy, like, does he follow?
I mean, I think so. Like, I think that's, I don't know. We'll see in the next year or so once scouts start looking at him, how he's kind of viewed in NFL circles and stuff like that. But like, it's just so hard because he's in such a different offense than any of those guys ever operated in. And Coop in 2014 was such a weird thing because he was a Lane Kiffin featured player.
The whole freaking offense was built, like every single play was built around him, which is like was not the case at all at any point with Calvin. And
Yeah.
it was certainly not the case with Julio.
So I think right now it's a little hard to separate. So maybe you would say if there is a guy like that on this roster, then it's Judy, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him sort of continue to take those steps. And
Mitch, where do you come down? Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Carl, were you?
No, I'm done.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's just like I don't. It is partly difficult just because of the different tenures of each, and it's so much of Judy's of what he excels at is just like downfield bomb, like something that I feel like other pass receivers, if they had a quarterback like Tua, could have benefited from. Technically, I don't know if he's got like the route running ability of like a Ridley or a Coop. But he's got
I haven't studied him close enough to really talk about traits.
But he's got the hands and he's got the athleticism of just about all of those guys. So
yeah, like Ridley sort of in terms of his ability to like stretch the field vertically. Like we saw that with when he had Coker his freshman year, when like a lot of what they did was built around him sort of taking the top off the defense. And then obviously under Jalen, we saw a lot less of that. So like it's interesting, like the things that Calvin could have done in a more like in a more developed passing game. So I think that's true that like if you stuck some of those guys on this team, I mean,
can you imagine Julio on this team?
And the great thing about Tua too, which I really like almost like a good NFL quarterback, like he just he trusts his receivers, right? Like sometimes he just kind of lets his receivers make plays. Like there was that play at the goal line, where it was kind of an under center tight formation, and they ran a play action, and I think it was Ruggs who was sort of tight to the formation on the left, and they were going to try to bring him all the way across. And he was going to be open, but like the pressure got to Tua right away because the end man on the line who was unblocked didn't fall for the play action. And this was the one where like Tua didn't have time, so he just lofted it up toward the goalpost basically. And the ball was knocked away. But like I kind of like that because I like you trust your receivers. These guys are great players. Have faith in them. And like I'm just thinking of if he had Julio.
Yeah.
Right. Like he would just trust who, like he would just be throwing the ball up to Julio. Like, oh, Julio's in single coverage. Like, let me just throw it up to him. Like, I'm going to trust him. And like, I love that.
Yeah.
Like Julio would be given so many opportunities down the field in a way that like he wasn't really given, right? Like when he was actually here. And like, that would have just been so much fun to watch. Anyway, that's kind of besides the point, I guess. Well, what do we think? So probably no Devontae Smith this week. I know we'll get to Tennessee later, but probably no Devontae Smith this week. That's okay.
Yeah.
Right?
They're deep enough to lose probably one guy long term. I mean, even two really would still be, probably deeper than they have been at the receiver position. Yeah, and I mean, I think they'll be all right. There's no reason to rush him back when you can just sort of pop Jalen Waddle in there. And
so who's the fourth guy? Is it Keefe or is it Shavers?
I think based on what we've seen so far, it's Keefe. I don't know that we've really seen much time from Shavers thus far. At least I don't remember him catching a pass.
Yeah.
He hasn't caught one yet.
See, I think like in terms of like they're different types of receivers, but in terms of their ability to produce, like the 2 through 4 guys are kind of like all in the same place, right? Like Smith, Ruggs, and Waddle.
The stats are almost identical for 3 of them, and Irv Smith is right in there too.
Yeah, but like it's like very, very interchangeable. So like when Alabama has their 11 personnel out there, if you lose one of those guys, and in this case it's Smith, they're really not losing any offensive potential, right? It's really just it hurts you in terms of like more difficult to give guys like a playoff or something, like swap out, keep guys fresh, give them plays off. Not really going to be concerned against Tennessee. more of a concern probably against LSU when these guys are actually going to have to like play the whole game. And
also, as a Louisiana boy, Devontae would.
That's right.
Hate missing LSU.
And it sounds like you would think like that's 3 weeks. I mean, I don't really like. What do we know about the injury? Just that it's just a hamstring, right?
Hamstring, right?
So we don't know if he had like an MRI or anything. We don't know we know it's like a strain, I guess, but like we don't know if there was an MRI. We don't know. It's probably like a grade 1, so it's probably like a mild hamstring strain if he's even questionable this week.
Yeah, he apparently hasn't practiced this week, so it's almost certain that he's not playing this week. Right. But I mean, 2 more weeks, I would be pretty shocked. Like,
I can't.
No one has talked about it as though it's that serious.
Right, and I can't imagine if it was a severe grade that he would be like even questionable this week.
Yeah.
And if it's not a severe grade, if it's like a grade 1, like a mild strain, then I would think in 3 weeks, like he's going to be good to go against LSU. So like for him, at least this bye is going to come at like a pretty perfect time, I think.
Yeah.
So what do you guys think? I guess the last big thing to talk about on the offense is probably the offensive line situation, particularly the guards.
Yeah. I didn't realize that. I mean, the offensive line has obviously been a disappointment in some ways. I didn't realize there had been that much, I don't know, question about Lester Cotton's. Like he obviously had a sprain that sort of limited him this week, and I know Deontay Brown came in against Missouri. I don't know. Maybe that's my fault for not for not grinding the tape closer, but I didn't realize there was some thought that he might get passed up.
Yeah. Mitch, what have you been thinking so far about Lester?
Same thing. I had no idea. And do we know that it's more? I mean, do we know that him being first team is more than just an injury thing? Like, has Lester been running second team or?
Yeah. This week in practice, it was like Lester was out there. He just was with the second team.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I mean, there seems to be like an injury component here, right? At least partially.
Mm-hmm.
But then also, I guess there's an issue. Like Matt Zenitz had a tweet today that to me seemed to imply that there's like that it's partially performance also. So I guess like a combination.
And Saban said something like somebody asked him about Lester today, and
just competing like everybody else, right, or something.
But he had a very telling comment. Let's see. Said Lester is competing for a job at left guard, a position he's held as a starter since the first 7 games. Saban referenced the ankle injury, suggesting he wasn't 100% against Missouri. Deontay's been at first team this week. Saban then made what AL.com calls an oblique comment, explaining that I saw someone where they quoted it directly. He said, like, some players think I don't like them. What I like is performance or something like that. It was very much a like... Yeah. It was a very like pointed thing, and I was like, "Wow, that's a call out."
That's strange.
Yeah,
I mean, Lester,
Sorry, I'm just casually eating some soup right here.
No, doesn't bother me. What kind of soup?
Portuguese bean soup.
Interesting. And verdict?
It's good. It's good.
There you go.
It's I don't know, Aaron's family's recipe. So it's
from a Hawaiian cookbook, so Tua would approve.
It's from a Hawaiian cookbook. I'm celebrating Tua over here, y'all.
That's right. This is your version of wearing the laser, or whatever.
Yeah, I'm trying not to get I'm a little uncomfortable with how like aggressively some fans have been going with the whole. It's a little bit like the
cultural appropriation, you think? Or?
Yeah, a little bit, like sombrero for a Halloween costume kind of for my taste,
Yeah. Well, like Miss Terry had it on in the Dixieland Delight video, didn't she? Like,
honestly, I'm sure Tua is fine with it, but it's just a little weird for me.
Yeah, I'm sure he is too. But I think that, it's like remember those like tired wired tweets on Twitter? It's like tired wearing the Lay's, wired eating Portuguese bean soup out of a Hawaiian cookbook to celebrate too.
Like Galaxy Brain.
Anyway, so so it's interesting that you sort of that you referenced that comment about Leicester and saying that, because the thing about it from Leicester's perspective, I have to imagine that this is particularly frustrating because this happened to him in 2016 also.
Yeah.
Right? Like seemingly without warning. I mean, that was our perspective. I'm sure there was something different in the program, but like kind of like out of nowhere late in the season. I don't really remember what game it was late in the season, but it was right around this time in 2016 where it was like, okay, Leicester, you're not the starter anymore at right guard.
Now it's Corin Curvin. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Maybe that happened for LSU in 2016, but like at some point it just happened.
It was around then, yeah.
We were all like, what in the world? So like, I have to imagine like this is like super frustrating for him if this happens again. And he's a senior now, I think, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
yeah, that's what I'm sure Saban is referencing, some sort of frustration on Leicester's part, which, like you said, is an entirely natural thing. Like if this is sort of a performance-based thing, like that's, I mean, like all the standard stuff about like, best players got to play, all that kind of thing. And, if you get beat, you get beat. But like, man, that's got to be frustrating.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest that I haven't had the time the last few weeks to watch the film as intently as I would need to have a fully formed opinion on the play of any one individual offensive lineman. So
yeah.
So I qualify what I'm about to say next with that, but and this is, I feel okay saying this because it's not a particularly hot take. I don't think Leicester's been bad. I think he's been fine. I'd imagine that this has to do with the fact that they just see room for improvement, and they just don't see Leicester kind of taking things to the next level. And while he's been fine, they're not going to settle for fine if they think that there's somebody else who could possibly do more than be fine.
And it might be that Deontay Brown is just fucking killing it,
Right. Which would dovetail with the idea that like they're just trying to do better. Like Leicester's been fine, but they want better. Mitch, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, it could be that that somebody else is better, or that they think they can get better from him, and he just needs to be pushed a little bit.
That could be also. It's shitty situation because there hasn't been like that many situations that I can think of over the last 5-6 years where a player at this point in the season without injury and without being like obviously terrible has just lost their starting job.
I think there are cases that you could have made where it maybe should have happened.
Yeah, absolutely. But like it is like a rare thing though, right? Like this, like it is unusual for Saban to make a switch that's not injury related, and it's not a case of like 2012, like Vinny Cincinnati got moved off star because he was just terrible against LSU, and like they just couldn't have him out there anymore. But this isn't that. This is like Leicester's been okay, but we think we can do better, and we also did this with the same guy 2 years ago, and it's just weird. I don't know. It's just weird.
It's odd.
Like I trust that it's the right decision.
I don't know that I want to assume it's like too determined either. I mean, he's just practiced for a week at first team.
Good point.
He very well could come out and start against Tennessee.
I'm thinking more like when I say that I think there's a change or there's going to be a change, I'm actually thinking more about the Matt Zenitz tweet than I am about the practice reports, because like he seems he seems to me to be like the most plugged in of all the beat folks, and that tweet suggests to me that like they want to make a change.
Yeah.
And I'm going to assume, maybe wrongly, but I'm going to assume that he kind of knows what he's talking about. And based when you have that and you have, you know, the practice reports, like I'm kind of thinking that it's not going to be Lester. And maybe like this is the time to do it, right?
Yeah.
Your whole season is in 2.5 weeks. That is your whole season. When you take the field on November, whatever it is, against LSU, this is your last game before LSU. If you want to see if somebody else can do better at left guard, and you want to see that in a place other than practice,
and if you feel like
one chance.
And if you feel like you can get a read on that in this game, then you make that decision based off this game, and then the starter, whichever guy you pick, gets the full week of practice, gets the full 2 weeks to practice for LSU.
Exactly. So I think looking at it in that context and saying like, okay, like this is for LSU in a way, right? Then it kind of makes sense. If it was going to happen, it's going to happen now. So I don't know what I expect necessarily to happen there. We'll see, you know, what happens on Saturday. We'll see how people play. But I also don't think I don't think it's going to make too big a difference one way or the other.
I wouldn't expect a sea change here. The real question, I think, for the offensive line in terms of their performance going forward is the development of Alex Leatherwood rather than who's playing at the left guard spot.
Yeah, agreed. What have you thought about him?
I mean, again, this is a case where I haven't, I feel like if I'm, I don't know, maybe ask Cole Kubelik or, go grind the tape or something. But it seems like there haven't been as many obvious gaffes in the last couple of weeks as there had been before that. So I feel like that's probably good. So, it tends to be one of those things where offensive line is one of those positions where if you're not thinking about them, like that's usually a good sign. And so I think that could, I just haven't really thought about the offensive line a lot in the last 2+ weeks, which I would take as a good sign.
Mitch, what do you think? Either about Leatherwood or about the offensive line as a whole?
Yeah, like you said, it's just kind of a 2.5 week season. So just a lot of, I don't mind the shuffling. I think it's interesting. I did go back and read because I hadn't seen his tweet or any of the reports yet. And he does kind of explicitly talk about Lester's struggles.
This is Saban?
Zenitz.
Zenitz. Yeah.
In his tweet, and there's a quick little story on practice today, and they both talk about his struggles, which I don't know. I hadn't really perceived, but
yeah. I thought they, for whatever it's worth, I thought that they ran the ball really well against Missouri. I just don't know. The backs played great. Damian Harris and Josh Jacobs had, in my opinion, some of their best games of the season against Missouri. So I don't know how much of that was a result of the offensive line playing great, because the backs were awesome. They were creating so many of their own yards and just playing phenomenally well.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll see. Do we want to talk about the defense?
Yeah, probably a little bit, right? At least with the Trayvon.
Yeah. I think just as a general matter, it's, I don't know. I do think they took a step forward against Missouri. I think it's a bit, I don't think you want to draw too many conclusions from it, given that Missouri was missing its top 2 receivers, I think. But, it was good to see, Savion come out there and have 2 picks. He and Mac were both in the top 5 graded players per PFF in the game. So I think that's a good sign, especially given some of the struggles that Mac in particular had against Arkansas, for instance. So, I don't think overnight this defense is suddenly like the 2016 defense, but it was sort of after kind of a frustrating day against Arkansas, it seemed like a good step forward.
Was it weird to you guys that Mac after the game was just like, yeah, I prepared more. I watched more film. Like I did more work this week. Wasn't that kind of a little weird?
It was odd. I appreciated the honesty, right?
I appreciated the honesty too. I was just like, I just would never have expected, okay. So I talk about this a lot too, that like sort of from as fans, we sort of like take for granted like the work that these players do. Like all we see is what happens on Saturday or the little bit we read in the practice reports, and we don't appreciate like all the work that they put in during the week, and we also don't appreciate how difficult like their lives are really during the week. And like Mac explicitly talked about like practice, and then I went to tutoring, and then I had to go back to the facility after tutoring to go like to watch film, and like that's difficult, really difficult. But it was just a little surprising that he was just like, yeah, I just did more work this week. Like that was the difference. Like, okay, that's I don't know how I would take that as like one of the coaches. Like I feel like
it's not surprising
maybe
either. All right. I mean, you're not really surprised to like, not that just that maybe the work hasn't been there before this week, and that might explain,
but are you're not surprised that the work like wasn't there before this week from Mac?
I mean, doesn't that kind of fit with what we've been talking about all season? Like being kind of slow to diagnose plays and get calls in.
Okay. So it fits. It makes sense based on what we've seen on the field. But it just surprises me that like what I mean when I say it surprises me, right. From that perspective, absolutely. Yeah. But just like the middle linebacker at Alabama, who also seems to take football like really, 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 really seriously. From that perspective, I'm kind of surprised.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, I don't read it so much as a like, well, I wasn't watching film before, so I decided to get out there and watch some film, and maybe that would help. I think it just may have been one of those situations where like he was used to preparing a certain way.
Yeah.
And as he stepped into the role this year, he was preparing the same way. And then after the Arkansas game, he was like, okay, what I've been doing is not enough. I have to do more. And that's what it was. So
that's not.
It's surprising to hear him characterize it that way, but I think that is a little more not.
Because I read like that quote like in somebody's tweet or something about that, and I was like, wait a second, what? So I actually went and like watched the interview, which I don't usually do. I usually just sort of get my information on the interviews from the tweets. But like I saw that tweet and I was like, he said what? Like, I have to actually find this interview to see what he said. And lo and behold, yep, he was like, yeah, I just watched a lot more film this week. I was just like a lot better prepared. I was like, okay. But you know what? We should focus on what's important. And what's important is that like Mac has turned over a new leaf, right? And now
his feet are in Tuscaloosa and he's focused on Alabama.
For those of y'all that don't know that reference, Mac tweeted something recently about he was like, oh, I love all my brothers in the NFL or something, or like all my Bama brothers in the NFL. And Marlon Humphrey quote tweeted and it says like, hey, you joining us soon? And Mac gave some answers. It was like he's like, I'm in Tuscaloosa right now. I'm at where my feet are at right now. And Damian Harris replied, it was like, man, you sound like you're giving an interview.
That was really funny. Oh, it's great. But anyways, okay. So larger point here is that was probably Mac's best game of the year.
Yeah, well,
agreed. Like,
yeah,
clearly, and that's like makes me feel really good about what's to come. I thought other people on the defense played well too. We'll
keep watching that film, Mac.
That's right. Keep watching that film. Christian Miller is playing really, really, really good.
Yeah.
Isaiah Buggs is playing really, really, really good. Like those two guys are kind of balling out. Raekwon Davis had a good game and did some other stuff.
And that's what someone asked me about that after the game, and
my man was swinging.
Yeah, and not great form either. Like if you're gonna pull that, like maybe it was just sort of like.
Oh my god!
But I'm never gonna like. Football is such an aggressive sport, and we encourage aggression at all times, especially from defensive players. And so I'm never going to hold it against a guy for like losing his cool occasionally, because you are in this like combat mindset all the time. And so it kind of shocks me that guys don't lose it a little more. Like you're banging up against other guys and, trying to overpower them. And it's just, so that will never, like guys pulling ankles and pile and like doing some of the, I hate to be the like other team was dirty. They all was dirty type of thing. But like that kid in Missouri twisted Henry Ruggs' ankle.
Yeah.
That bothers me a whole lot more than Raekwon Davis getting pissed off and throwing some punches at a guy because that dude like punched Mac in the head or some crap like that,
because like twisting an ankle is not a combat thing, right? That's not like a combat mindset thing. That's just like a
that's like I'm going to deliberately try to like hurt you, basically.
Yeah.
And then like there were some. I'm not going to name anybody specifically, but like there were some tweets. I mean, maybe you guys agree with this, so I shouldn't necessarily frame it like this, but like there were some tweets because like Raekwon kept playing after that. So, and there are some tweets from some Alabama fans like, Saban knows what Raekwon did and he keeps playing him and I'm not okay with that. And I'm just like, Jesus.
Yeah, you're acting like he pulled the old Brandon Spikes eye gouge or something like that. Like,
chill. Like this ain't that serious. Like, oh yeah, he shouldn't have thrown punches, but like it's like Saban's like this is like some like moral violation for Saban to like leave him in the game for a few plays after that. Like, who cares? I don't know.
That's something to complain about. It's not much elsewhere. I don't know.
I get. But yeah. Anyway, so that was that. The guy obviously like, and I mean we talk about him a lot, but he deserves it. Like Quinn Williams is ridiculous. And at this point, like I think that we pretty quickly accepted, like maybe like right away after Louisville accepted that like Quinn Williams is the real deal. But like if there was any doubt, like my man is the real deal. Like he is as good as it gets, and by as good as it gets, like he's like maybe one of the best defensive players in the country. Like he's ridiculous.
He is literally the highest on. I mean, take PFF for what it is, all those caveats. He is the highest graded player in the country, highest graded player, period, in college football.
Okay, I didn't know that. I knew he was the highest graded defensive player. I didn't know he was the highest graded player. Yeah. Mitch, what do you think about?
There were like, I think I saw like 3 or 4 screenshots from the Missouri game where he's like halfway across the line of scrimmage before anyone else on the field looks like they've even moved yet.
Before like Drew Lock even got the ball.
Yeah.
The ball is in mid-flight of the shotgun snap, and Quinnen has his hands in the center's chest.
I remember earlier, his get-off is amazing. I remember earlier in the season, Saban talking about like how Quinn is like, he wasn't necessarily talking about Quinn's physical talents, but he was talking about like how like Quinn is very perceptive of offensive linemen's tendencies, and he does a lot of work like watching film and picking stuff up, and like he's really good at bird eagling the offensive lineman that he's going against. And I think that this is part of that. Like his get off, like probably at least in part stems from that he's just so good at anticipating the snap because of all the studies he's done and all the little I could see a situation where like Quinn is studying and he knows the guy he's going against does some small little thing based on what the snap count is that he know to tell Quinn like a millisecond before anyone else knows that the snap is coming. So because that's what a lot of your get off is just about, you know, your timing and your anticipation more so than just like
athletic. It's not athleticism, it's timing.
Right. I mean, it is, you know, athleticism in that it's like quick reactions and everything, but there's like, but that's like the smaller component. The bigger component is just the anticipation and the timing. So like, I feel like a big thing with Quinn is like, Quinn is one of the defensive linemen where I think it's very clear that he is a step ahead of almost anyone else on the mental side of things. And I think that's like, really, 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 really one of the biggest reasons why he's been such an impactful player for Alabama this year. But like they're playing well up front. I mean, if Mac is going to play like this week in and week out, like they're going to be really, really, really good up front. We do have to talk about the secondary. Obviously, the news about Trayvon is both significant and bad. What do you guys think?
Well, as it kind of goes with Tennessee this week, I feel like they're going to get challenged. I think if it's anything like against the Auburn game, probably see a lot of throws down the sideline deep. Which we've seen Patrick, you know, do a decent job with downfield, but we've also seen Savion not do as well when it's not a tight end he's covering.
Yeah, I agree. But I mean, I guess the thing I would say about Savion, you can't really ask for a better fill-in, right? Like most teams are not going to have like a fill-in like that. I definitely agree that there is like Savion is going to be tested deep. And that's going to be, and like, he's going to be tested this week against Tennessee, like you said, because they're going to want to throw the ball around. It's not going to matter because Alabama's going to win that game. It will matter against LSU, and I don't want to get ahead of myself, but like if LSU moves the ball against Alabama, it's going to be the result of big plays, and they're going to test Savion's ability to defend the deep ball like a lot in that game. So like that matters. So this is like a good, like he needs this time, I think, to sort of like get that experience, you know. Get those and make those improvements. Carter, where did you have any other sort of thoughts on like that, on the Trayvon injury and the Savion, you know, substitution?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. You like Trayvon was their best corner. Like it's a drop off. It's a significant drop off, but it's far from an unmanageable one. Yeah. Like you go from having, you know, probably two pretty great corners and one really good one to having probably one really great corner and one pretty good one. So, and that's certainly, there have been very solid Alabama defenses in the Saban era that did not have better cornerbacks two better outside cornerbacks than these two guys. So you know, especially as, you know, they keep going and these guys get more comfortable in their roles and Surtain continues to gain experience. I don't know. It sucks, but it's far from a disaster.
How do you guys feel about the rest of the secondary?
Still positive, I think. Yeah. I mean, like you definitely lose something going from, you know, going from having Trayvon at star and Shaheem at safety to having to bring Jared Maiden in. But it helps Shaheem, I think, because he's only got one role now. Right. Deontay is still the best center fielder in college football, which sort of leads me to a secondary point. Like this is way looking ahead, and you know, we can spend as little time on this as we want, but like I would kind of, you know, we've talked about this before, how, you know, Saban doesn't like whole scale change things dependent on matchups, but I sort of would love it against LSU if he would just play a lot of cover one man.
Yeah,
like I think just let Deontay sit back there and you know, be the great center fielder that he is. Let the guys body up in one-on-one coverage, and like I don't know. I don't think LSU is as good as people think they are. Like they have just, and like I don't know, like Bill Connolly's talked about this. Like so far, they've just sort of seemed to have like a magic ability to just like summon up a big play. Like they're not efficient at all on offense. And they're not
terrible passing downs.
They're not that explosive either. They just seem to get a big play miraculously whenever they need one, and that is not sustainable. It's not sustainable at all. So I would love to just like consistently put them behind the chains by loading the box and just, all right, Joe Burrow, you think you can, generate the plays you need to beat this Alabama team down the field, do it.
Yeah, well, I think also one of the other questions is going to be like, can those receivers separate from the Alabama defensive backs?
Yeah.
Losing Trayvon is like the sort of cover one man, I totally agree. That was always the fallback strategy in my mind as well. And we talked about that even some before the season.
Right.
But like now you lost one of your best, man cover players. So like that takes a little bit of a hit. I still think they're really well equipped to do that. And I wonder, the thing I wonder always, and you alluded to this, is like the cover one, the sort of playing man will always be, first of all, it'll always be sprinkled in, and it will always be the fallback strategy in case things aren't going great. Will it ever be the primary strategy that they just come out of the gates with and roll with it? I don't know.
Probably not, given Saban's history, but
yeah. What does anybody have any thoughts? It's a couple weeks removed, and Alabama just had a really good defensive game against a very, very good passing offense. Is Missouri considered a very good passing offense, or just a good passing offense? Good.
Yeah, they were missing their top two. I don't know.
Right, you said missing top two. Right.
Locke has been very
inconsistent.
Yeah. But I mean, you saw it. Some of that, like he does have like an NFL arm. Like he made a couple throws that were just like, and threw a touchdown against like the only 3-man rush I have ever seen Alabama pull in years. And I was like, what is this? What is this? What is this? And he threw a touchdown. I was like,
that was a great throw.
Oh, it was amazing.
Great throw. But what do you guys have any, like, again, a couple weeks removed from it, but any thoughts about the Arkansas game? Like, because we didn't have a show then, and obviously, like, the pass defense was a pretty big topic of conversation then. So, like, I didn't necessarily come in to this podcast planning to talk about that, but just so I don't really have any like thoughts off the top of my head ready to provide. But
I mean, most of what needs to be said has been said. I mean, it was Chad Morris is really one of the best. He's one of the best play callers in college football, and he had a really great game plan drawn up. And Alabama made some mistakes, and also they were just it was, I don't know. So I don't know. It's not as good as it needed to be, but ultimately it's not that concerning. The one thought I have is that the game it reminded me of was the 2016 SEC
game against Arkansas.
Game. I was going to say the 2016 SEC championship game, where it was kind of like for the first part of that game, it just seemed like Florida with I think Austin Appleby was the quarterback for that game. It just
they marched down on the first drive against Alabama. Yeah. They converted on 3 or 4 third downs.
And it was a lot of bootlegs and throwbacks and tight ends and backs and all this kind of stuff. It was very much reminded me of that game. And you were like, are we really letting them do this right now?
Yeah.
I think part of it is we weren't getting the Arkansas team that didn't even know who their quarterback was. And it was like the first 2 or 3 games of the season, they were rotating all of their quarterbacks.
And like Saban is never going to badmouth an opponent, but I think he was actually telling the truth when he said that coming into that week he was the Arkansas team I see on film now is a whole lot better than they were in the first part of the year. And I think that's true. I think they are the best 1 in 5 and 6 team in the country.
They're really good at hitting the best fair win total.
Just ahead of Nebraska, the best 0-6 team in the country.
Yeah. Okay. So, anything else about the? I know we're kind of running up against time. Before we sort of look ahead a little bit, anything else about the team past performance? The kicker had a good game, so that was nice.
It's
right?
What passes for a good game?
Well, I mean, he made some kicks. You know, like I think that's like that kind of counts, right?
He made every kick except for like a 52-yarder that was pretty.
Yeah, actually, that was actually sort of impressive.
Yeah, I think it was. I mean, he hit at least one of those kicks was from 40 plus, right? I think maybe.
Yeah.
Just keep doing that. Just hit the extra points. Hit everything under 30 yards. Most things under 40 yards. Okay, hit everything under 35, please, and then whatever else is gravy.
That's always what we've asked. Just everything under 35, like the Jeremy Shelley. You know?
Yeah, beat
like
Jeremy Shelley.
Yeah.
That's punt.
Yeah, no punting.
Yeah, just don't punt. Don't punt.
Punting. I feel like the sort of a really good piece of evidence for how bad Alabama's kicking situation has been in recent years is that our gold standard is Jeremy Shelley. Like that's all we want. Like just be Jeremy Shelley, who was like this like really mediocre kicker who couldn't even be on the field for like 40+ yard field goals because he didn't have a leg, but he was just like pretty accurate from like medium range, and he still missed
his last year. He didn't miss a kick.
Yeah, he didn't miss a kick.
His longest kick was like 42 yards in the national championship game, but he didn't miss a kick.
Right. Yo, he made like he was hitting those against LSU, and then he still missed an extra point. He still missed an extra point,
which forgot about that.
Which actually kind of bothered me at the time because like that game against LSU should have been 22-0. 22-0 is more like that type of score is way more of a reflection of how that game went than 21-0.
Yeah,
and Jeremy Shelley robbed us of 22-0, which is like 22-0. Like it suggests like this sort of like dirty, sloppy, weird game where points were tough to come by, and instead we got 21-0. And you look back on that like 50 years from now, and you think, oh, it's just like 3 touchdowns, normal game. Alabama played great defense, put together some touchdowns. But I was like, no, like it was not like that at all. Anyway, and yeah, punter was bad against Alabama. The punter's just like not.
He's just he's just bad. I think we just have to live with the fact that the punter is bad.
Yeah, which is fine. Like it's just cool. Tennessee. I don't really know much about Tennessee. I'm just going to be straight up about that. We could look at their stat profile, but
I can pull it up. They're just like I said this before the show. They're just it's the same group of guys that they were last year. Pruitt just has them playing better than Butch Jones did. So they're fine. They beat Auburn. Their post-game win expectancy in that game was 29%. So maybe a little bit of luck there. But
what was their post-game win expectancy against Georgia?
3%.
Okay. Because I didn't see that game. I thought the narrative was that they were like kind of competitive in that game.
They were plucky.
Yeah,
I think is the way I would put that.
Yeah, 3% was not the percentage that I was looking for. That's not that high.
No. They were never gonna win that game against Georgia. Like it was never in doubt. It was just like you were watching Georgia. Like, are you seriously not like?
Just putting them away.
Yeah. It was like 24-12 in the fourth quarter.
Right. That's what I was thinking. That's what I was remembering is that it was like 24-12. Yeah. And like didn't one of Georgia's touchdowns come on this like weird play where there was like a fumble and the guy like ran it in from 30 yards out or something. So there was like a strange play. Do you guys have anything to say? Do we have anything else to say on Tennessee, or should we spend the rest of the podcast.
They're just, I mean, like,
Looking
you
ahead
look
at
at their
LSU.
numbers, they're not, they're decently explosive, which kind of dovetails with what you saw against Auburn. Like, they hit some nice passes down the field. They're not efficient, 82nd in success rate and 71st in marginal efficiency.
What are the defensive rankings?
Not great.
Okay.
Um,
Because they're supposed to be, like, the narrative, I feel like, is that they're, like, okay defensively.
They're not good on defense. They're just sort of like not abysmal.
Yeah.
They're actually offensive S&P plus. They're 38th, defensive 97th, which is sort of weird.
Yeah, it's almost like purely their passing efficiency. They're like 22nd or 36th marginal passing efficiency. 22nd explosiveness. It's like the only remarkable thing about this team.
I'm trying to pull up. Oh, here we go. I just want to see the scores of these recent games that Alabama's played against Tennessee. Just because.
Oh, I looked at them. Only two have been within 14 points. There was one.
Yeah.
There was a stretch of like 3 straight years where they beat them by exactly 31 points.
Yeah. That's so funny. 2010 was 41-10. 2011 was 37-6. Although I think 2011 was 6-6 at halftime.
Yeah, that was that one.
And then 2012 was 44-13. And that 2012 Tennessee team, that was like the Tyler Bray team. They had some like NFL receivers. Like that was pretty good offense.
Yep.
Alabama went in there and played really well. And then 2013 was over immediately. That was a game at home. That was the red team game, right?
Oh yeah.
2014, Tennessee was competitive in 2014. That was like Coop's huge game, scored in the first play, Lane's finger guns. And then like Tennessee made a run, like they scored a couple touchdowns, made it kind of close. And then 2015 was a great game. That was a great game.
Oh yeah. I was at that game. That was great.
Tennessee brings it every so often, right? Like 2009, 2015, like unexpectedly they roll into Bryant-Denny and they play like a great game. And like those were those 2 years where they played great games. And then that's it. They haven't been competitive in like any other game in the Saban era.
They haven't been competitive at Neyland like in the entire Saban era. So yeah, don't expect this to be close.
So here are the scores at Neyland. 2008, 29-9. 2010, 41-10. That was like Julio had like 250 yards or something.
Yeah.
2012, we talked about 44-13. 2014, Lane 34-20. Not as close as the score indicates. And then 2016 was the game where Tennessee was coming off that like heartbreaking loss against A&M, where they lost in like triple overtime or something.
Yeah.
And Alabama beat them 49-10. That was the game. Like Eddie had a punt return. Bo had like an 80-yard touchdown and he high-fived the fan.
Yeah.
Tennessee, like CBS had like Peyton in the booth for what felt like half a quarter or something.
Yeah. I remember that.
And like Kamara scored in that game and Peyton's like rude and he's like, get on in there. Like when Kamara scored, and I was like, okay. That was really funny. Anyway, yeah, not going to be competitive. We probably have to wrap it up. Do you guys want to say a little bit about LSU? Like, what did you guys think of LSU Georgia? I'm just sort of curious about that. We have plenty of time to talk about LSU in general, but like in the coming weeks. But like, do you guys have any thoughts on LSU Georgia?
I think. I don't know. They just looked sort of like kind of typical of like a good Les Miles LSU team. Like they kind of lined up and smacked him in the mouth, and it was clear Georgia was not ready for that. And they got kind of. I would love to see what the win expectancy is on that one because I would not be surprised if LSU's wasn't that high.
I'll tell you what.
Against Georgia,
79%.
Yeah.
LS. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, you.
I was gonna say LSU can cover, man. They can really cover.
Yeah.
I mean, from
those corners are good as hell.
Oh yeah. Yeah. From drop back to pass, nobody was open on like any play. Like they are really, really, really good. And that is going to be like, again, like plenty of time to talk about this in the coming weeks. That is a really fun and exciting matchup between the Alabama receivers and those corners because those guys are good. And like, obviously, like Greedy gets like all the talk and as well he should because like, first of all, he's awesome. Second of all, like he's cool as hell. But like, as just as entire secondary, like they are really, really good. And in any other year, this would be the kind of situation where I would think about Alabama going to Death Valley and I would say like, wow, I don't really think that they're going to be able to throw the ball on LSU. This is the year where things should be different. I mean, we'll see about the injury, but like, you know, that'll be the thing. Like we talked about the Heisman earlier. Tua goes in there and tears them up. You just might as well give them the award.
Yeah.
Because that's like, can we get a quick look at where LSU ranks defensively, like on like on S&P and stuff? Just curious just how high they are in certain categories.
13th.
Okay.
They will let you stay ahead of the chains a little bit. They're only 53rd in both success rate and marginal efficiency, but ISO PPP 11th, marginal explosiveness 13th, which
and what about
dovetails with the idea of a really great secondary. Like they're not letting. Let's see, passing downs. Where's? Oh wait, here we go. Not stellar numbers. 42nd. This is defense. 42nd in marginal efficiency, 15th in marginal explosiveness. So you're not likely to get you're not likely to get that big of plays. And if you are,
that's interesting.
You're barely getting to the chains. You're not getting a big play.
Not quite as like impenetrable as it seemed at times against Georgia, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, plenty of time to touch on that in the coming weeks, but obviously very excited for that. Like should be, unless they trip over themselves this week, but they're at home, so I don't think they will. Should be a top 5 matchup.
Yeah.
Which would be really fun because that hasn't been the case since
2013.
Oh, no.
There was
2015. 2015 was 2 against 4 because when LSU was undefeated. But like, I think very much like that year, like this LSU team is probably not as good as like a top 5 ranking, and like that was the case also in 2015 when LSU was like not the second best team in the country coming into that game.
S&P thinks they're like a top 15 team, which seems about right to me.
Yeah. I would agree with that. I would agree. All right. Oh, should we do score prediction for Tennessee?
Let's get another one of those. Well, no.
Spread's 29.
I think they cover that.
Me too. Even if Jalen plays a lot.
I'm gonna go. What was the score of the 2016 game? Was that 49-10?
Yeah, 49-10.
I'll go with 49-10.
I will go with, in none of these games, Alabama has not broken 50 points against Tennessee since 1986. I will say that they do it in this game. I will go 52-7.
I like that. I like that one.
I also like them breaking 50. I think like 50-13.
50-13. Okay. 7 feels low to me. I feel like they're going to do more than 7, but I'm going to stick to it because I said it. Can't take it back. All right.
Well, that's it for this week. It's good to be back, y'all. We'll be back next week. Possibly earlier than usual next week because I'm getting married next weekend and I'm going to be slightly busy later in the week. So keep an eye out for that and roll Tide.
Roll Tide.
Roll Tide.